All right, Talent War Group is live. We're going to give it just a minute to let some of the viewers trickle in and find their way to this screen.
This is what we call the awkward silence of delay.
All right, Mike, what do you say? We get started with this?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Guys, thank you for joining the Talent War Group today. We've got an awesome panel and an awesome discussion that we're going to lead. So just some background real quick. The Talent War Group is an organization of experts with a wide variety of backgrounds who want to share their lessons learned and a lot of insights on things like talent management, leadership, organizational development, everything along those lines. And what we rely on to grow is your support. And we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have this organization without it. So if you like what you hear, share it with your connections and contacts, reach out to everybody on here and help us drive more engagement so we can continue to provide insights like the ones we're going to share today. If you have any questions or comments as we go throughout this discussion, please engage with us directly. Go ahead and throw a comment in on LinkedIn or whatever platform you're watching us on today. Send them through the chat function and we're going to do our best to address them as we go. So real quick, just going to go around and give some introductions. So of course, we got Mike Sarraille, CEO of VF Overwatch, and the Talent War Group, the mastermind of all of this. Myself, I am a 2015 USAFA graduate, former Air Force JTAC and Special Warfare Officer, currently the Director of Sales at Con Mechanical Contractors here in beautiful Dallas, Texas. Joining us today, we've got Dalton Rice. Dalton's a former Green Beret, having served tours in the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. Before accepting an opportunity in public administration as a management analyst, previously held varying operational and admin roles in the healthcare sector. Dalton, really glad you're here. Also got Lisa Jaster, a West Point grad, one of the 3 females to graduate from the first integrated Ranger School class in 2015. She is currently a battalion commander in the U.S. Army Reserve and also a professional motivational speaker with over 12 years of corporate leadership experience. Lisa, thrilled that you're here as well. In the other corner, we got Fran, don't let me screw up your last name, but Racioppi.
Racioppi, close enough.
Racioppi, close enough. All right. Now, Fran is the founder of FRSix, which is a security management firm. Previously held roles as a CEO of consumer products company and was director of global security at a major tech company as well. So former Green Beret, served multiple tours in the Middle East, Europe, and across Africa as well. And Ryan Crayne, who is an active Army infantry officer, served in operational positions with the 82nd, 1st ID, 75th Ranger Regiment, currently an MBA candidate at the University of Michigan, and it is finals week. So we're glad you're able to find the time to join us today, Ryan. I've also got Michelle joining us today. So guys, thank you all for being here. Our topic for today is right people and right seats. And 2 sessions ago, we had our very own Lisa Jaster lead a discussion on the importance of leaders being active readers. In other words, why it's critical for leaders to be constantly improving themselves and expanding their breadth of knowledge. And that's a great lead into this discussion because the first thing I want to do is reference a book, which is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And for me, the most memorable concept from this book is this parallel that he draws, or this comparison, that an organization is similar to a bus. Lots of seats, lots of people, hopefully all going in the right direction, or at the very least in the same direction down the road. So picture your organization as that bus and all the members on your team in each different seat. And think about where your company might want to go. In other words, how it might want to improve. That's the next bus stop. Now, if your first thought is that you need to get on that bus and start burning rubber down the road, it just needs you to stop because you're getting ahead of yourself. Before you even think about driving that bus and putting the key in the ignition, you really have to make sure that the right people are on the bus and that they're sitting in the right seats. And what I'm getting at here is there might be passengers, members of your team, who aren't valuable contributors for the journey you're about to take. Now, they may have been in the past, but if they aren't aligned with the current mission and the missions you're anticipating facing in the future, they're the wrong people. You might want to get those passengers off the bus right away and bring new passengers on board who are actually going to contribute to the journey you want to take. So let's cut back a little bit on the bus comparison and just talk straight. Every business owner wants to make their business better. They want more revenue, they want more streamlined operations, they want fresh ideas. And you probably don't know exactly what that process looks like, because if you did, you'd already have accomplished it. But if you start by assessing your team members before anything else and making sure that you have the right people, you're going to accomplish three things. One, you're going to build a team that's a lot more agile and adaptable. Two, you're not going to have to spend as much time figuring out how to motivate your team or manage them, because the right people are intrinsically motivated, and the right people are going to do the right things and deliver the best results they're capable of, regardless of the incentive system that they're provided with. And three, the right people are going to have thoughts on what the destination should be and how to get there. And if you have the wrong people, even if you know the right direction and even if you know where you want to go, you're not going to reach it. So what is the right person? When I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy, General Richard Clark, who was the commandant at the time, he's currently the superintendent, one of the greatest leaders I ever had the opportunity to learn from, had a saying: you want to be in the right place at the right time, wearing the right uniform, with the right attitude, ready to do the right thing. And if someone can check each of those 5 boxes every single day, day in and day out, it's a safe bet that they're going to add value to your team. Now, that's not a comprehensive answer to who the right person is, but it is a pretty solid start. So the bottom line here is define the right people for you by knowing your company, knowing your core values, and ruthlessly pursuing people who live by them. And that's exactly what we do in any top tier or elite military selection and assessment. It really boils down to ensuring that you get the right person based on their values and their capabilities, which is talent, not raw skill. So now that we've talked about the right person, just want to touch on the right seat, which, by the way, is the right order to do this in. The who has to precede the what, because if you have the right people, they're going to help you build the right seats and define the right destination, as well as make adjustments on the path to it. So you have to build seats and define roles in a way that people fully understand what they're actually accountable for, what's expected of them, and the performance that they're going to be judged by. And you'll definitely have multiple distinct responsibilities for every role, but you have to be careful not to overload or over-diversify a single seat, because even high performers can be spread really, really thin and become ineffective very quickly. So why is specificity important? Because if you're doing things by committee, you're setting up for failure. If everyone is responsible to accomplish a task, then nobody is actually responsible for making sure it gets done. So people have to know exactly what their responsibilities are if they're going to take ownership of them. So be sure to develop clarity in each of those roles or each of those seats. Ensure that each political role has a clear responsibility or a set of clear responsibilities. Develop and abide by clear and repeatable communications channels. Make sure you build in some degree of redundancy, and truthfully, just don't overcomplicate it. Now, once you accomplish all that and you're sure the right people are in the right seats, you got to be ready to do it again. Because if your company is improving or going from good to great, that means those seats are going to change as time goes on. And hopefully the people are going to change too. You want them to develop and grow and pursue new challenges, meaning that they're eventually going to outgrow their role. That's a sign of success. That's a good problem to have. Because if the business isn't growing and the people aren't developing, the bus isn't moving. If your company's stagnant, you might need some fresh blood. So just keep in mind that the pursuit of the right people and the assessment of the right seats has to be a constant endeavor, and you really have to trust your top talent to do it, which is a point that we're going to address as this conversation moves on. But as you do it more, it's going to become a more refined and more repeatable process that comes more naturally and comfortably. But off the bat, you really have to start by consciously and intentionally driving that process. So that's a lot. And it's a pretty broad overview of a pretty complex topic. So let's bring in the rest of the panel and start hitting on the finer points.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Dan. That was a great rundown. I mean, I think this is a critical part of building any organization, and whether that is an organization that is starting from the ground up in a startup where you come in and you're 1, 2, 3, 10 in the organization, or you're coming into an organization that's redefining itself, or it's a mature organization that has to find efficiencies in the way they're operating. One of the things that you find is that role confusion is one of the single largest factor for tension and ineffectiveness in the workplace, especially amongst organizations that have high performing talent who are going to jump in and they're going to try to fill a lot of gaps. They're going to try to work in a couple of different lanes. They're going to try to to execute on the mission, even if they may not know exactly what that mission is. And so having clearly defined roles and then selecting the talent around that is critical to understand exactly the direction that you're going. So once you have those roles defined and you have those people, you have to develop out that vision and that mission at the leadership level, and then that has to translate down into everybody in the organization. What's going to be critical here is an identification as you lay out your mission and your vision for that organization as the leader. What are the characteristics of the high performing talent that you need? We've talked a lot about in our different podcasts the 9 characteristics of high performing talent, and that's drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, effective intelligence, team ability, curiosity, and emotional strength. Now, it's going to be ideal if you can go out and find candidates that suit all 9, but that's probably going to be unlikely. But you, as the leader of the organization, as you scope and define these roles and you identify the players that you want to fill them, have to figure out which combination of those 9, is it 3, 4, 5, that you need in each one of these roles to then find that talent, assess them based on those characteristics, put them in the right role, and then watch them succeed.
I want to quick jump on something that Fran was talking about with regards to defining those roles. One of the issues and concerns I found in a growth organization is that there's a lot more role requirements than necessarily having the people on the bus. So you have too many jobs to do. So each person, especially he even mentioned your talent almost taking on too much responsibility sometimes. As an individual is finding that they're playing 3 or 4 roles or they're taking on a bunch of responsibility, that's a great way to identify maybe my position is actually 2 roles, and in a growth environment, we need to look to fill some of this workload and very much align it with the specifics of that role. And I apologize for that stumble, but if a job is developing and we're taking the bus on a detour, again, staying aligned with the bus phraseology, but if the bus is taking a detour and we find a new role developing and our talent is taking on more and more responsibility, that might actually be identifying who needs to be our next hire.
Lisa, awesome point. Mike, you said you wanted to step in real quick.
Yes, it looks like he joined us and then maybe fell off. Mike Hertzendorf was late add. If he comes back on, we'll introduce him. Dan, keep on going, man.
Awesome. Lisa, love everything that you just said, and I hate to interject this, but I think it falls along the same lines. We've got our first question. It's coming from Corey Schultz, I believe via LinkedIn. How do we create a culture where it's okay to move the right people around until we find the right role for them?
Hey, Dan, I'll touch on that one. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Definitely a lot of great information from a lot of great people. One of the roads that I want to go down with, and I don't want to go down the culture road because that's multiple podcasts in and of itself. But when we say right seat or right people, right seats, what does that mean? And it's a perspective of who's leading that organization. The counter argument is, well, if you have a bad leader and they have the right people in the right seats, that could be their subjective, perception. So what is the talent war group's perspective? Well, to surround ourselves with people who are smarter, better, different, differing views than us, and strive to be the best, but we can work as a team together. Bottom line is, mediocre talent hires and retains mediocre talent. And so how do we overcome that from a cultural perspective? Sometimes we just have to do it as individuals, while other times, if we have our team, we can start shifting that culture the way we want it. Obviously, leaders who can affect the change and who can balance those second and third order effects of doing so are going to have a much better time. But again, if an individual is one that wants to surround himself with good people and continue to become the best version of themselves, the best version for the organization, and the best version for the team, they're not going to hope something's going to happen. They're going to continue to move on, and they're going to continue to go. People don't leave the organization or what they love to do. They leave their bosses. They leave the culture. And they're going to find that culture or try to find that culture that fits them. And that's why we're here, is we want to address some of those, those issues. We want the individual, the organization to both know that, hey, by surrounding yourself with like-minded people creates that healthy competition, and it pushes us to become better people. Everybody on this panel has, differing views and has, different backgrounds, but we all have the same common goal. I'd like to pass it off to any other panelists, who may want to touch on this. Thank you.
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Dalton, I'll step in on that real quick. You mentioned that mediocre talent hires mediocre talent, and that's something that we've talked about on previous panels. That's something that Mike and George talked about in the talent war. You can't trust people who aren't A players to not hire to hire A players. You have to involve your top talent and the best and most educated, most experienced, and highest potential people on your team in that hiring process, and do so intentionally. So many companies just go about talent recruitment and talent identification and even talent retention as this passive thing. And that's just not the right way to go about it. Something to keep in mind is that when you have the right people on the bus, you have to keep them on the bus. Talent retention is just as big of a part, if not a bigger part and a more important part, than getting the right talent on the bus in the first place. And something that we have to understand, that high performing people and people that we would classify as talented are sought after, which means they have options. And if your bus is no longer the best option for that talent, then they're going to identify that and they're going to move away probably more quickly than you'd be able to move away from them. So this is not a one-way street. This is a give and take relationship. And the most important thing to remember is that it is an ongoing process, not just for recruiting, but also for retaining.
Yeah, Dan, I wanted to follow up kind of on that culture question about developing a culture where somebody can come in that may be unsuspecting as being the right fit for the job. So kind of a story I have is I was in a battalion that's a combined arms battalion. You have tankers and you have infantrymen. It's a culture where those two kinds of people clash. And I was an infantry commander, and at a time we had some pretty poor maintenance metrics. And during that time, we would continually hire executive officers that were fellow infantrymen, and they don't have really the training or the skill set to be really focused on maintenance like the armor officers. And we saw a pretty big dichotomy between a group of people that cared about maintenance quite a bit, which were the armor officers, and a group of people that kind of shrugged it off, that was the infantrymen. And as I was stepping in command, I really tried to push up to my boss that I think the right person for this job as an executive officer is actually a tank officer. And I made the point that he might not have looked like the right fit because he was not an infantryman. He didn't understand that form of company, but he had the talent and he had the potential to come into that role that was the right fit for him. That was the right seat for somebody that cared about maintenance. And we brought on this armor officer into an infantry company, and we had stellar results. And I think my boss and me, the reason why we assess that seat as being the right one for an armor officer, that right type of person, is because we had a keen focus on the metric that mattered in that role, and that was being good at maintenance. And so we identified what needed to change in that role, the continuing order of infantry officers coming in being bad at maintenance, and we identified that right person needed to be in a seat that cared about maintenance. And so I think that helps when visualizing what it means to have a culture that can bring in somebody from outside and understand that they're the right seat. I think Mike had something to follow up on this.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks. First off, I want to put this in the context for some of the business leaders out there. We talked about Jim Collins, one who has a heavy influence within venture capital in the startup world. What it comes down to is, and Dan said it from the start, the who is more important than the what. And if you look at venture capitalists that routinely invest in the same founders, that's why. Is they know it's not so much the idea as it is the people behind the idea that know how to commercialize it or market it, take it to market, and be successful. So, to Corey's question, how do you set a culture of moving people around until they find the right fit? You explain it up front. And we hear this from business leaders a lot of times. How do I explain where the company's heading? How do we explain the strategy? You explain it. You tell people what you're intending to do. So basically where you're heading, how you plan on getting there, and ultimately what the destination or success looks like. Now, ultimately, guys, if you've explained up front, hey, we're going to shift you around in different roles until we identify your strengths, that's ultimately what you want to do. When you play to somebody's strengths, and there's a high correlation between some of these strengths and where their passions lie, you're going to put somebody in a role where they're highly engaged. And for business leaders on here, there's a lot of studies on employee disengagement. Just to put some numbers behind it, the estimate as per the last Gallup poll that I saw was for every $10,000 of salary that you pay, if you have a disengaged employee, that is costing your company $3,400. That's massive. And so if you don't have somebody engaged in a certain role, you got to get them off the bus as quickly as possible, or find a position within the company that suits their passion, that suits their strength, to where they're a multiplier, not a detractor.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, there's great points, and that's the team ability characteristic that we talked about. And if you bring people in and you're explaining it up front that the mission of the team is greater than each of the individual parts, and you understand that the aggregate value is going to bring more success to the team, then people have to get on board with that. So I want to answer and address another question that came in from David Swartz. And the question is, how do I help my leadership put the right person in the right seat? There has been a lot of ambiguity of who is responsible for what. Even when I attempt to try and give feedback, it's met with more group ownership rather than department or individual leader ownership. It makes it tough to not have redundant effort and confusion. This is a great question, David, and I'll say that it becomes challenging when you've identified something with your leaders, right? Because you can't necessarily go in and say, hey, boss, you're all messed up, and let me give you the reasons why. So you have to approach it probably in a more tactful manner. And so how do you do that, right? Well, that comes back to this role confusion, and probably having that conversation, I would say, with your boss, is to go in and say, hey, I think that we have some role confusion here, and then lay out some of those examples and show where there is this redundancy of effort, where this is a misalignment, where you have multiple people working on different things. And if you're the one who is experiencing this redundancy, either you feel that you're doing things that others are doing, or you feel that others are doing things that you need to be doing, this is a great opportunity to seek clarification and guidance from your boss. And one of the things we talk about a lot in leadership is you want to have these open communication and open communication flow up and down, and identification of expectations up and down is critical. And this could be an opportunity for you to have that conversation up, down, and across from your perspective in the organization.
Those are some great points, Brandon. Let me just add one other thing, to David's question. This talent war that's ongoing is going to take some time, and it's going to take influence. I hate saying just time, but it takes time and influence. The talent war started, bottom line. And eventually, once we continue going down this road and continue to go down this path and start fighting these battles that we need to fight, we're going to shift the culture. And once we get to that point, the culture within organizations is going to shift, because what's going to happen is the organizations who buy into the talent war and who buy into hiring the best talent, the right people for the right seats, those organizations are going to have a competitive advantage that nobody else will have. And so one of two things is going to happen. Those other organizations are going to get on board, boards of directors, governing bodies are going to see it, or they're not. And then it's going to shift, and a competitive advantage for those other organizations, they're going to blow them out of the water in competition, in services, and in sales. So we want to touch on some other questions. I'm going to pass it off to Lisa, and we'll continue this discussion. Thank you, guys.
So the next question we received is actually from Austin Walker, which is where do you look for that talent? Waiting for people to apply seems like a slow, inefficient process for finding quality talent. Now, although I have an answer for this, I would actually be quoting the man himself. So, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Where do you look for talent? Everywhere. Everywhere. Young and old, black and white, straight and LGBT, public universities, Ivy League schools, you look everywhere. I would love to tell you that you can find talent at the corner of 5th and Main, but the fact is, talent is where you least expect it. And, often I tell the story of an unassuming young Korean American in my buds class who I just sort of, because he was unassuming, dismissed him that he probably would drop from the training. And now at the age of 34, he is a NASA astronaut, Harvard-educated doctor, Silver Star recipient, and one of the most amazing humans that I've ever met. It's less of where you go to find it, and it's more of how do I create an organization that becomes a talent magnet. Now, we've seen this in a lot of my posts on LinkedIn, guys. We just, George and I just had an article in Forbes about this, about becoming a talent magnet. And a lot of people are like, well, special operations is a talent magnet. They don't have to go out and find the talent. And to some degree, that's not true. But it didn't start off that way. If you talk to the special operations guys back in, the Vietnam era, they will tell you that they were not getting some of the right candidates into the door. They still got some amazing human beings. And of course, Fran, Lisa, and Dalton and the rest on here, Dan and Ryan, we read the books about Vietnam. That's ultimately what invigorated us as young children to join the military, I think. That's probably a safe assumption for the rest of you. But you have to create an organization where people say, I want to be part of that organization. For me, it was meeting a staff sergeant, a force reconnaissance staff sergeant from the Marine Corps. And I was enamored with this humbly confident, articulate, highly respectful individual. And I'm like, if he's part of Force Recon in the Marine Corps, that is where I'm going, because that is who I want to be. That is who I aspire to be. Now, what a lot of companies fail is they fail to tell the story of their current employees, their current leaders. Now, special operations, they've got these movies, they've got these books, and sometimes within our community as white professionals, we frown upon these things, but they're actually the best recruiting tool for the special operations community, because it grabs a hold of the imagination and the motivation of young men and women in high school and college who say, you know what, I've got to try this and see what I have, what it takes. Now, the other thing, and we call it the ultimate litmus test for whether you're a talent magnet or not, is that when your people, your current, and also your alumni from your organization, your company, introduce themselves as part of the company. This is why West Pointers, they will tell you they're West Pointers. All right? They won't throw it out up front, but that's something they're wildly proud of. Or McKinsey, consultants. Even if a McKinsey consultant now owns a company, he's the CEO, he'll work in that. He worked with McKinsey because he's proud of it. And lastly, Marines. People still identify as former Marines. That's when you know you create an organization that attracts talent. So great, Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. That's a great question from Austin.
The summary of what Mike says, or not really necessarily the summary, but the 2 bullet points that I really feel strongly about, and one is a topic we're going to discuss in January on one of these forums, but that's reputational management. That's one of the best recruiting mechanisms is the reputation of the company. And that's not necessarily marketing, but take the Marine Corps as an example. Have you ever seen a billboard that references the Marine Corps that doesn't make you want to buy a sword and go slay a dragon? It fires you up. It attracts a certain type of person. And that's just by saying Marine Corps. And as somebody who's a soldier, you say the U.S. Army, I think of certain things because of that reputational management over the years. And it's not just the marketing, it's the people who have left, the people who, even if they quit, they still hold pride in that organization. So I would say reputational management is a great way to recruit people and then being open to find those people. So Mike said, hey, don't care if they're male, female, gay, straight, none of that matters. That's another initiative that I'm really passionate about, which is delete the adjective, is don't quantify the people you are looking for and limit them by adding an adjective. So for me, I always say, I don't want to be strong for my age or a good engineer for being a female. I don't want those limiting factors. And when you stop looking at those, it opens it up. But then getting back to the base of the question, which is, where do you look? It's you always look. Be a member of professional trade organizations, volunteer in your community, be part of the environment around you. And those relationships start naturally building, and you recruit the team that you know you can trust and work with moving forward. And you do create this tribe mentality, and people get pulled and drawn almost like gravity into your organization. And no, by the time you're working with a recruiter, especially for some of these high leadership positions in companies, the right talent, it might be too late, because that we're really looking for an existing relationship when I'm going to jump ship and move to a new company.
Awesome, Lisa. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to move on to the next question here from Stephen Horsley. Question is, should organizations build a career map displaying how experience, education, and training give everyone the opportunity to move from the factory floor to the boardroom? All right. Speaking from my personal experience, and the answer may surprise you, no. Let me explain. Every organization should give all of their employees opportunities to advance within the company. All of them should give them opportunities to build their education, both for things related to what's going on in the company and where they want to be, what they want to achieve as an individual and what they want to eventually accomplish. You should train your employees. You should train them constantly so that they're always improving and so that your company is getting better every single day. But be wary of building a career map or a specific set of tasks that you have to accomplish to move from one role to the other. You're going to get one of two things that can happen. One, and this is a direct parallel from the military. In the military specifically, I have a lot of experience with fighter squadrons. When the military is looking to promote individuals, they look for people who have excelled in their past roles. There's also a timeline associated with it. But basically, if you're an outstanding fighter pilot and you have plenty of awards and accolades to back that up, you're going to get opportunities to advance. The issue with that is there's oftentimes where people are put into command roles where they have to lead and manage and hold people accountable when they are not prepared for that, because or maybe they don't have the capacity to do it, maybe they don't want to do it, maybe they just don't have the experience with it. But just because someone is an outstanding fighter pilot does not mean that they're going to be an outstanding commander. The opposite effect can also happen, where you have somebody who enjoys what they do on quote unquote the factory floor. And while they do want to expand their education, while they do want to improve themselves, they don't necessarily want to end up in the boardroom. And if they see this platform that says you are expected to accomplish this within these amounts of time to advance, that's going to be a deterrent to them. Now, Ryan, I know you have something to say on this as well. I'm more than happy to hand it off to you and hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Dan, I'll back you up on Stephen's question. The answer I got to say is no. The right seat in an organization is not a glass slipper that has a perfect fit, perfect education, all these things. I see you, if you make that, you're going to find yourself either constantly breaking your roles as far as this person doesn't have this degree, this person doesn't have this experience to get the right person in, or you're just hiring somebody with a resume that may not actually be the right person for the job. Looking back at when I was in the Ranger Regiment, I remember in my company alone, we had 2 platoon leaders that were 15 years older than the other. We had our headquarters sergeant was actually an engineer. We had some former investment bankers that were young junior soldiers with bachelor's degrees. We had a master's degree, language sergeant, and all these people came from all these different aspects, but they were in the right seats for them. Their experience, their line and block chart did not fit if I had to draw it up, but they were where their talent needed them best. So I would have to say no, because if you're out there looking for talent, like Mike said, you're going to find it everywhere. It's about how you can recruit for it instead of just looking at the metrics on somebody's resume. Okay, I think we have Lisa, I think, is up next.
Well, yes, I think we have another question, right?
Actually,
Josh Kahn.
sorry, Lisa, before we hop over to that, Fran wanted to pitch in on this one as well.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate for a second and go the opposite direction, and I think that comes down to culture. Some of it has to do with the culture of the organization. Now, in my career dealing with security management and building security teams, one of the things that comes up a lot with respect to security officers is their investment in the organization and the company. And one of the things that I talk about is and try to build is an investment in their future and an investment in the company that they work for. And that comes down to, are you building a career or is it a job? And so to answer your question, Stephen, I would take a step back from the tactical level. What do the steps look like? And I would say, what do you want organizationally? And what you want organizationally in certain departments may actually be different than what you want for the company as a whole. And so do you want to create an environment and a culture where people come to work and they are there because they have a job, meaning that if they get a better opportunity, if they get a few dollars more an hour, if they can work a little bit less, get paid a little bit more, they're going to immediately leave? Or are you creating a career where that person is invested in that company, they're invested in their future in that company, and every day they are excited to wake up, come to work because this is their career in that organization?
Yeah, hey, Dan, thanks for giving me a moment. I agree with both Fran and Ryan here, guys, in both degrees. Ultimately, mapping out somebody's trajectory is not a bad thing. This really comes down to what we call, and what we talk about in the book called, and this is not new, an employee value proposition. What do people ultimately want out of a job? Well, they want autonomy. They want ownership over their roles and responsibilities, and ultimately they want growth. Is there growth? Is there a path within this company for myself to grow, whether functionally or along the leadership chain? Never am I going to put myself into mapping something out with very objective measures, because somebody may meet all those very objective measures and say, hey, listen, I got my college degree, then I got my MBA, then I got my Lean Six Sigma. You have to promote me based off the chart you mapped out. So you don't want to hamstring yourself by having very objective measures. There are so many subjective, qualitative measures to whether somebody's going to promote to the next level. I think Ryan hit it where, we saw it in special operations, whether it's the SEAL community, the Ranger community, the SF community. Somebody will do absolutely great at a, let's say, platoon sergeant level. They crush it, but then they move on to a company first sergeant role, and they just seem to have tapped out. It's hard to articulate, but tapped out after their platoon sergeant role, and they just didn't have what it took to make that next leap to the next leadership rung. So great feedback from both Ryan and Fran on that. Thank you.
And guys, as always, an awesome conversation. Unfortunately, we have a bunch more questions that we're not going to have the time to get to right now in this discussion. That being said, that doesn't mean we're not going to answer that question. Please reach out to all of us and ask us those questions for our take, because what you just saw, I had an opinion, Ryan had an opinion, Fran had an opinion, Mike had an opinion, four very different opinions, not necessarily to say that one is right and the other is wrong, but it's different perspectives. And that's kind of what this is all about, is being able to take the principles that we're talking about and figure out how to apply them to your company and your organization to drive whatever success means for you. So right now I'm going to start throwing it around the group and do some some saved rounds and final comments. Dalton, I'm going to pass it off to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And again, thank you, everybody. Last thing I would like to say kind of goes down a little bit of why we're here. Right people, right seats. Mike talked about it, and from a Green Beret perspective, we use the whole person concept. We can do a whole another thing on the whole person concept, but that's important. What is the whole person, and how does that person fit into the organization to make it a better place? The other thing, too, going down a different direction, and I hear it too often, is because we've always done it this way. And I hate that saying more than anything. Because we've always done it this way is a cop-out excuse for not wanting to grow and change. And once organizations take that first step, now they're in this area of uncertainty, and they're in this chaos. And you need to find the people that can control that chaos and continue down the direction of growth. When people start getting uncomfortable, we divert back to what we already know, what we're comfortable with. And that's typically the status quo because we've always done it that way. So if you're a leader in an organization, if you're an individual growing, once you break away from the status quo, continue to grow, continue to push through those limits, find mentors, seek help, get advice, and do what's best for your organization, do what's best for you, and surround yourself with like-minded people. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dalton. Lisa, let's toss it your way.
Dan, you started this off with talking about Jim Collins' Good to Great. And so I reread chapter 3 yesterday, just in preparation for this discussion. And the title of chapter 3 is First Who, Then What? And I think one of the things that I've found over my 12 years working for Shell Oil Company and then working at engineering firms is that if you have the right who, sometimes the what will change. And that's okay. Not only is that okay, but that allows innovation and allows a business to survive. So I think my final thought I want to put out there is if you really feel like you have the right people on the bus, but you feel like you don't have a seat for them, maybe the bus isn't going in the right direction. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Brent, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. So when we started, I talked about the 9 characteristics of high performing talent. And what I'll end with is that I think you can sum up a lot of this conversation with integrity. It comes down to honesty and integrity. And are you honest with yourself and your organization to, number one, understand exactly who you want and the type of person that you want in the organization and the characteristics that they're going to exude? Are you honest and real about the roles that you need that are going to drive your organization forward? And then are you honest with those above, below, and around you to have the difficult conversations for those who may or may not be on that bus to drive that organization forward? So integrity, honesty, if you can do those things, I think you can be successful in defining roles and the respective people that you need for them.
Thanks, Fran. Ryan, what you got?
Yeah, final thoughts. Just taking it holistically, right person, right seat, and then expanding on one of Mike's points, looking for talent everywhere. And if you take a page out of the special operations book, in this panel, you got Rangers, you got Green Beret SEALs, and Air Force Special Operations. They look for talent everywhere, and they know there's no one size fits all person. People are different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different creeds, and they look everywhere and they don't discriminate. People in special operations selections are completely different, but special operations and business can too is know what to measure, and you might be surprised at who is going to fit in that seat. If you're looking at the right things, that person may surprise you, and you may find yourself unsuspectingly getting that right person in the right seat.
Before I throw it over to Mike, I'm going to just add my comment. I want to build off what Dalton said. And Dalton put it perfectly. Just because you've always done something a certain way, that's not an indicator that's the right way to do it. There's a joke that is probably going to rub Lisa the wrong way here, but there was always ways that we poked fun at West Point. And one of the things that we would say is, West Point is at this point 218 years of tradition unhindered by progress. And of course, that's a joke. It's not true in any way. But when you look at tradition, you have to have a reason for the tradition. You have to have a reason that you're not changing the way you're doing it. And that's how you become stagnant, by doing something the same way you've always done it. And that's not an acceptable answer to move forward on for your business, and it's not an acceptable answer for your employees to trust you to make a decision based on that. And with that, Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
All I will say following that, Dan, is shots fired. I am going to get out of the way. I know Fran, Dalton, everyone else will let you and Lisa have at it offline after this. No, joking. Hey, I'm going to go off of Fran's last comments. You hit it, man. It's the conversations. Listening to all you guys, one, and I've learned a lot from this, is you have to be so intentional about these conversations about your talent. And man, I hate to make sweeping, assumptions, but I doubt a lot of business leaders are doing this because they're so concerned with sales and all these other functions within the business that they're not having these conversations about talent. Hey, let me end with this. I spoke to the Ohio State University Naval ROTC Midshipman Battalion, which was like 80 young midshipmen, both Marine option and Navy option. And I don't play the generation game. I sat down with a Vietnam veteran shortly after my first few deployments in Iraq, and he's like, "You guys are better than us." And I couldn't understand that. I mean, these are the guys, the reason the Vietnam SEALs were the reasons I joined the SEAL teams. And I started to realize it when I got older, that speaking to these young men and women made me motivated. And I was talking to them about leadership and giving them mostly what not to do based off my career. But this next generation, they're picking up the torch and everything is well in hand. That said, where I'm leading into this is it's this weekend that we see a very strong tradition take place between two schools step onto the field, young midshipmen and cadets from the Naval Academy and cadets from West Point engage in a healthy competition. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether Army or Navy wins, America wins. I just want to wish luck to both sides. And Dan, actually, my question is, what the hell does Air Force do when the Army and the Navy are duking it out? I'm joking.
Yeah, it's okay. We got another saying that Army and Navy play for second. So,
to close this out, Michelle, all of us are interested in your top 3 points. Go for it.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for today's discussion. I learned so much. I learned so much about growth, what to look for when I'm looking to grow, and who to surround myself with. The first point that I got was from Mike. They asked him, where do we look for talent? And he said that talent was everywhere. It's where you least expect it. Less of where you go to find it, but more so how you create an organization that is filled with talent. Because at the end of the day, the people in your organization are who are representing your organization. What you believe in is your organization giving people the opportunity to grow. You create an organization where people want to be a part of it. That tied into Lisa's point. Whenever you're hiring people, don't quantify the people you are looking for and add an adjective. It adds limiting factors. So again, don't limit to the people that you can hire and the people that you can look for their character and what they can do. And another point that I really liked from Lisa was at the end that she said, if you don't have a seat for them, maybe the bus isn't going in the right direction. So maybe your company isn't growing and you need to reevaluate what you're doing. And the last point was from Dan. He said, do not make a career map for the people in your organization. You should give all employees the opportunity to grow. So don't give them a specific set of tasks or a checklist on how to grow, but rather encourage them throughout their whole career.
Awesome, Michelle. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining us today. And of course, to all of the awesome panelists we got here, thank you guys for signing on to today's discussion, and all of our viewers. Always love the kind of support and the kind of interaction we got today. So thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. If you like what you heard, if you want to continue the conversation, get some of your questions answered that we didn't get to, connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, ton of social media platforms. You can find all of us on there. And please do share our posts and share these sessions with your organizations, your connections, your family, your friends. And if you want to improve yourself, your team, your organization, all of our team members, everyone you're looking at here today, and the entire rest of the Talent War Group is available to come work directly with you to help you find success. So check out thetalentwar.com and of course, efoverwatch.com to learn more.